Hello there.
There he is. How are you, sir?
I am well. How are you, Jody? Hi, Lauren.
Good.
Bill, it's so nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Bill, this is pretty unofficial. We just kind of dive right in.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, start diving.
Start diving. Okay.
Welcome to Subject to Change with our guest, Bill Reed.
One of the things that I really want to get into a little bit, if it's okay with you, in the last several recordings, we've started talking about regenerative practice and what does that mean? How is it a different approach to work at all levels and living, quite frankly? And since you are just grounded in it,
Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When you see the little microphone in the lower right, click on that to learn more. We're so glad you're here.
the expression of the work as a journey, I think that's really important. And I think the most successful sustainability practitioners or regenerative whatever term you want to use, the most successful people are always aware that they can't possibly know everything or the goal answer. They can only be practicing toward their current understanding of that. And that there's that openness to more knowledge. So maybe that's what the practice is just being open to more knowledge.
That is the practice. And we would say it slightly differently. It's the practice is, are we evolving consciously?
It's not about the project.
Right. I have run across a lot of situations where something doesn't go right in a project, something doesn't go right. And instead of looking at that circumstance and saying, why didn't it go right? What can we learn from this? And kind of sharing that there was an evolution of the thought process or the purpose behind the project.
Right.
Everyone kind of clamped down and said, oh, that's embarrassing. What do you think of embarrassment?
And it is embarrassing.
As a mode of operation.
Yeah.
It is embarrassing.
Well, you've heard me tell stories, Jody. Probably Lauren hasn't, but we were fired many times and we probably still will be, because we are pushing the envelope. And the envelope we're pushing, if you will, it can't be a push, but the invitation that we're extending is that this project is not about the project. It's about the system, and it's about you. The project is the interface. And so we don't start with the project. I like to say your project is not the project. The project is the system of life that we're part of. And if we understand that, then it informs the project itself. So the system comes first, not building a project and doing less damage to the system. It's how do we align ourselves with the way life wants to work in this particular place? And and this is the hardest part, is getting rid of my preconceptions and being humble enough to learn those lessons for each project.
The being state.
That's a hard one.
It's insane. So you have to be your own psychotherapist in the process
of
the work.
And we practice the becoming state, the being state required for every project, because it's different in every case. Who do you need to be for this meeting? Who do you need to be for this project in order for it to launch that community, those living system participants on an evolutionary journey?
It's interesting. So I'm a practicing interior designer and sustainability consultant, but in addition to that, I teach at 2 local college campuses. And I find that I'm going to start with my students first. The students are much easier to convince that they're part of the whole.
Yeah.
They've never thought about it that way before, but you can kind of get them to this point where they start to understand that they are actually part of the system and they have impact on a system. I find it harder personally in my practice to get people to think of a project as being part of a system. And it's been funny because something that I just went through, let's see, 2 classes ago, I was just teaching about high performance buildings. And I happened on the AIA's, they have a whole web section dedicated to this now. And it has tools, for example, that teaches, or that kind of relays to architects and designers, I suppose, how to push your project beyond the 4 walls and actually engage with the community.
I did not know.
What was that, Bill?
Don't stop at the wall.
Yeah.
Don't stop at the wall, right? And so I found this really interesting because as I sit and I look at my projects, especially as an interior designer, I find that sometimes it's hard to even get people to want to do the right thing on the inside of their walls for their own people. And now I'm supposed to convince people to go outside of the walls.
And see, that's the hard part, is that this is not about convincing people. This is about introducing people to the potential that's out there if they slow down and pay attention. Then there's no convincing needed. But that's the hard part.
Begin with the end in mind.
And as one of our mentors says, begin with the end in mind. And the end in mind is the system. The evolutionary health of the system. If we do not start there, it is really difficult to convince people to. Well, I've got a meeting right after this, actually, with a city, and they are all full of technology, right? What we're going to do, and they have UC Davis involved with their research department. And so they're all excited about technology. And what I plan to ask them is, how do you know which technology is right?
Yeah,
And
why?
Yeah, and why? And the only answer that I can imagine for that is to ask the place what it needs, and the community as a living system what it needs and what it could benefit from. Now we can actually begin to have meaningful dialogue on what's appropriate, as opposed to imposing my idea of good on people, which is, by the way, which is a form of colonialism.
That's true.
If I just say, I know what's right for you, I'm going to go through the lead checklist and say, we're going to do this and this and this because I get a lot of points for it. That's gross colonialism.
I was on a call.
Sorry, that's a way too hyperbolic statement, but just to make the point. Right?
Yeah, to make the point.
Real world example.
John Becker was involved with some facilitation for the SUNY Oneonta Ford Hall project at DASNY. And that was quite a marvelous project because it was one of those cases where we went through a process with facilitation to understand like what was needed for the project. And then we got proposals in, and we learned from the proposals that we hadn't communicated well. I think we had communicated, we hadn't communicated that the one immovable thing was the budget, because the state establishes the budget.
Right.
And we also didn't understand the impacts of a district energy system on this project. And once we got the proposals in and went through the process of discussing the proposals with the teams, we realized that we were approaching the project. We wanted to make it net zero on its own, a dormitory. We wanted to pull it off a central system and make it zero net energy and say, yay, it's a standalone zero net energy building. And we wanted to do a panelized, like an overlay panelized insulation system. We realized that taking it off the central system was ignoring the potential of that system. And so if we reframed it and said, look, quite frankly, the cost is immovable. Let's be frank about that. It's immovable. And our ultimate goal is to get the entire campus to zero net energy. How would this project meet the goals of supporting the students and supporting the people who have to maintain that building, take advantage of what systems are available for panelized production in the area? There were none at the time, so let's leave that open. How would it meet those intents? And that changed everything, because now every SUNY system is looking at reducing their domestic hot water from the central the temperature from the central system, so that over time their central system can become a renewable central system. And that was an entirely beneficial sea change of thought for everyone. But nobody wants to talk about that project because we didn't actually do the project the way we intended, so therefore we failed.
Oh, really? That's great. It emerged.
It emerged, it evolved, the whole thought process evolved. The facility manager for SUNY Oneonta is very happy we went through that process. So the client doesn't feel like it's a failure, but other people do.
Really?
I shared it as of Tuesday, I shared it with my class as a lesson. We were talking about renewable energy, and I wanted to start touching on larger scale systems and why we have to move away from centralized systems and do more of a district energy sort of thing. So
what departments though would have considered that a failure? I'm curious.
It's actually, I'm going to be honest, it was mostly DASNY, because there was a feeling that we had gone through a very cost intensive facilitation process to inform how this RFP would be written. And there was, there was the interplay. We had bridging documents, which were very prescriptive. So it was a whole, the shift of approach. It was that awkward stage between childhood and adolescence, right? We hadn't quite gotten to the full formed adult version.
Oh, so you were doing like 35% bridging documents?
And I found them incredibly restrictive. Everyone else thought that they were needed in order to meet campus standards.
They are restrictive. They could, well, that's a whole other, I could talk about that.
That's a whole other, I have a big problem with bridging documents, even when they're done exceptionally well.
Yeah, design build too.
They're design build. So then we had, and it was design build teams coming in to make the proposal, but they had all been so inspired by the facilitation about achieving zero net energy and the panelization systems. They didn't understand the cost was immovable. So
the process was too prescriptive.
The process was too prescriptive, and it wasn't actually transparent enough because we should have invited those teams to be innovative, knowing that the cost was immovable. In this case, cost was the immovable thing.
And give them 30% for innovation, right?
Right. So if they said that the panelization wasn't achievable because there were no manufacturers in the area, then and recommended a different way to do it to get to the zero goals, that would have been fine. I say all that, but we're actually quite relieved that the whole process made us rejudge the central plant system. So if they had come back with innovative solutions to make this building a zero net energy, it might not have achieved our goals anyway, because that knowledge is too valuable to not have.
Yeah.
So it happened the way it needed to happen. And I celebrate it. I talk about it all the time.
It's about dancing.
I want to bring this home, I think, with Lauren, with a story she told a while ago. She was talking, I forget which interview it was, Lauren, but you were talking about working on a project and there had to be some interior work that was done by a craftsman, and you laid out the basics of what was needed, but totally were informed by the abilities of the craftsman and what they thought was appropriate for that woodworking. And the client didn't get why you didn't just tell that person what to do. And your response was, because he knows how to do the work, and that can fulfill the needs of the design, but it can fulfill it better if I'm paying attention to what he knows is right and what he knows will work. And I think that that's kind of an example of surfing the emergence.
It's perfect. You want to elaborate on that story, Lauren?
So, sure. So actually, that's the way that I do all of my custom millwork. I intentionally leave kind of some of the details missing, right? So I show not how I want the connections to be done, but I give the overall picture. And then I basically say, you know how to build this better than I ever could. You tell me how you want to build it so that it looks mostly like this. This is the piece that we all want, but I don't work with wood every day. You know the wood, you know the species, you know the joints that'll work, you know what will, basically be the most durable for the longest. So You tell us how to build it.
So you've struck, to me, you've actually hit on a profoundly important aspect of this work, is that you are letting that person's essence be expressed, their inherent potential. You know, you're not telling them what to do. You're saying, I give this direction and we got to do this for the client and we can figure this out together, but you're dancing with them as opposed to commanding them.
Right.
And this work is about discovering the inherent potential or the intrinsic nature or the essence, whatever term you want to use, of every living entity. That means every person you're working with and every living organism, like a place we're working with as well, an organization. That's it. That summarizes the entire work. If you can do that, you're doing regenerative. You are regenerating.
Incredible.
Life is perfect as it emerges.
Yes, that's true.
All
like
right.
that.
On that note, I got to go, ladies.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you.
Okay. Well, happy to do this again. I enjoy talking to. I realize I'm doing a lot of talking, so my apologies. But
That's why you're
No.
here.
Please
It's good.
don't apologize. Oh my goodness.
anyway, fun to visit with both of you.
Yes. Thank you so much.